Part 73. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 724. Chapter 724 Hunting for Clan Leader. Ian's eyes narrowed, and his expression seemed to calm down. The two of them, one behind the other, caught Galen between them. The strange thing is that Garen is in the middle, but he can't feel the existence of the two people before and after him, as if they are just a simple picture. Boom! A terrifying surge of purple mucus suddenly spurted out from the purple-haired man, turning into tentacles in mid-air on the ground and rushing towards Garen crazily. The speed was astonishingly fast, overwhelming, as if the entire surrounding space was occupied by purple mucus in an instant. The fifth holy method. Stab! The purple-haired man's eyes suddenly lit up with a dazzling purple light. In an instant, all the tentacles that surged out flew up and turned into sharp thorns that shot through Garen's direction like lightning. They were surrounded from all directions, up, down, left, and right. At the same time, Lan also raised her hand. She seemed to be a different person now. A black snake and dragon tattoo suddenly appeared on the back of her hand. She gently moved her hand in front of her, and an invisible and transparent aura quickly condensed. In front of her, it transformed into a ferocious transparent snake dragon, which was 5 or 6 meters high and more than 10 meters long. The snake dragon looked like it was condensed by water. It opened its mouth and let out a silent roar, then flew towards Garen in front of it. In front are countless purple spikes, and behind is a huge snake dragon of unknown power. Boom! A violent purple explosion slowly spread out along with a circle of transparent ripples. The strong wind blew all the surrounding trees and grass to fall backwards. What was even more strange was that where the rippled wind blew, the grass withered and turned black, the trees withered and lost moisture, and the birds and squirrels that could not dodge were even more bizarre. He lost all vitality characteristics in an instant and fell straight to the ground, without a trace of breath. Click. A giant fragrant tree with a thickness of more than 10 meters was blown off by the violent explosion. Most of its trunk was broken, and it collapsed suddenly. Smashed into the center of the explosion where purple smoke filled the air. Is this the only level? A deep voice slowly came out from the middle of the smoke, spreading quickly like water ripples to a radius of 100 meters. The purple-haired Wellington's pupils shrank, and the only sense of presence on his body quickly disappeared, and his whole person completely lost all aura and life characteristics. Keep your eyes focused on the center of the smoke. After being hit by my venom cage, it can still explode. Suddenly, a terrifying shock erupted from the center of the smoke. There was a flash of golden light, and Garen's mask instantly appeared less than 10 centimeters away from him. Then a huge and terrifying force hit Wellington's chest like lightning. Without any resistance, the impact of thousands of tons easily penetrated and took away all the flesh and blood in Wellington's chest, turning into a column of bloody mist that broke through his back. Garen's right arm penetrated Wellington's chest directly, penetrating it like an iron drill. Wellington's eyes were filled with horror, and a large amount of purple-red blood foam filled his mouth. Holy law! Supernova! Suddenly, a hook-like transparent arc came from behind Garen, hitting his vest with a powerful impact. Lan connected his hands to the other end of the curved hook. His face was pale, his breathing was rapid, and there was an obvious weakness all over his body. It was obvious that he had used all his strength. Her mind was blank as she watched Garen punch the clan leader through with one hand, her lips trembling, but she didn't know what to say. She only had one thought: she didn't want to die. Don't want to die? This crazy thought made her explode wildly with the huge power she had just gained through promotion. Supernova's transparent hook kept penetrating Garen's clothes like an electric drill, turning fiercely on his skin, as if it wanted to drill into his body. That's the only way. Garen looked back at Lan, indifferent, calm, and even a little bit disappointed. Clang! The transparent hook was directly knocked away by a powerful repulsion, collapsed and exploded in mid-air, and turned into nothingness. Tulan and Wellington's scalps were numb, and a chill spread throughout their bodies. This is far beyond the scope of human beings. With such terrifying physical strength, he is simply a monster in human skin. Wellington's eyes flashed fiercely, and he hugged Garin with both arms. Regardless of the severe pain of the wound, the purple light on his body suddenly became more intense. Holy method! Extremely explosive. Boom! Violent purple airflow flames exploded with Galleon as the center. The terrifying force of the explosion pushed Tulan back several meters, and a transparent snake dragon quickly appeared in front of her to block the explosion. A large crater that was originally blasted out by the previous explosion was swept away by the explosion again, and a huge sinkhole with a diameter of 50 or 60 meters suddenly appeared on the entire ground. The walls of the pit are as smooth as glass and mirror-like. I don't know how long it took. The purple flames flashed in the air and finally dissipated. The purple smoke also quickly decomposed and dissipated. The deepest center of the pit was more than 30 meters above the ground. Garin stood there alone, his clothes were burned to a certain extent, and finally there was a trace of emotion on his face. Just at that moment, he felt a sense of crisis and directly activated the first star. His body instantly doubled his strength, and at the same time his energy exploded to resist Wellington's terrifying explosion. But that's it? He stretched out his right hand and gently touched a scar on his left shoulder. It was a red abrasion only as thick as his index finger. What was surprising at this time was that the abrasion was healing on its own at a speed visible to the naked eye. Interesting, the original indifference in his eyes finally disappeared, replaced by a slight excitement. Even he, who had opened the 7-star life point, was actually injured. Although it was only the first star, for the current Garin, this situation was simply unheard of and the first time he encountered it. It turns out that the vampires are not as weak as they thought. He raised his head, his eyes instantly crossed the distance and looked at a certain breadth on the edge of the giant pit. Bang! The ground of the huge glaze-like pit beneath his feet suddenly cracked. Garin rushed straight towards the breath, dragging a long after-image behind him. His speed soared to an appalling level in an instant, and only one sound that broke the sound barrier could be heard in the air. Scream! There was a fierce fire all over his body, as if his whole body was on fire, crashing into the aura on the edge of the giant pit. Die! Directly breaking through the huge pit of mud blocking the road, Garin appeared straight in front of Tulan. At this moment, Wellington, who was supposed to die in the explosion, instantly appeared behind Tulan and hugged her fiercely. Walk! The two people quickly faded and disappeared, as if they were leaving this world completely and entering another space. Want to run? A trace of ridicule appeared on Garin's lips. At high speed, he stretched out his right hand and grabbed it hard, and a clear black light appeared on the edge of his palm. The Huanlu fist burst out instantly. Although it was only a momentary mental hallucinogenic impact, it also caused Tulan and Wellington to stagnate slightly, and the speed of their disappearance paused. At this moment, they were originally able to disappear before Garin's attack arrived, but after a moment's pause, they could no longer avoid this urgent grab. Bang! With absolute terrifying power, the black light palm hit hard like a giant hammer, shaking the ground. Tulan and Wellington were hit so hard that their bones and flesh exploded like tomatoes in a bottle. Pressing down hard, it turned into a mixture of two masses of flesh and bone and was smashed into the ground. I will come back. Just wait. Galen Thomas, the sound of Wellington's gritted teeth came from the void around him. Garin's ears twitched, his right arm suddenly stretched out, and he grabbed it into the air. With a scoff, a purple figure was pulled out of the air by him. It turned out to be Wellington, who had just been smashed into a pulp. He was completely naked, and his lower body was still connected to a poor pangolin. His body was constantly squirming, as if he was rapidly regenerating with the pangolin's flesh and blood. At this time, Garin grabbed him out with one hand. He could no longer say the rest of his words. His head was blown off by a palm, leaving only a headless body that fell down. The flesh and blood all over his body quickly trembled and decomposed, turning into a pile of rotten flesh. Not moving either. "You can't kill us, ha 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 ha," Wellington's voice sounded again. "Our flesh and blood are scattered all over the world. Even if there are no materials for our resurrection here, we can be reborn elsewhere at any time. Galen Thomas, you are dead. I will take away everything you value and value bit by bit, destroy them all." In an instant, Garin's figure appeared in another forest dozens of meters away. He stretched out his arms and grabbed two naked human bodies from the air with both hands. They turned out to be Wellington and Tulan. "You," Wellington opened his mouth in horror and wanted to say something, but before he could say more, his whole body exploded and was blown into countless pieces of flesh by the dark energy of the water bird fist. Tulan screamed in horror, and it also exploded, turning into countless pieces of flesh and blood flying everywhere. Raindrops of minced meat and blood splashed all around. Garin was indifferent, his eyes scanning the surroundings indifferently. "Are you going to say something again?" he said calmly. This time Wellington didn't dare to make a sound anymore. He bit his lips tightly and didn't dare to make any sound. He was reborn in a group of ant nests under the soil. With the help of the ant's flesh and blood, he turned into the most basic blood core and head. He never dared to make a sound again. Suddenly, Garin's figure flashed and suddenly appeared on the branch of a big tree on the right, where a naked Tulan was hiding. She watched in horror as Garin rushed towards her. She was so frightened that she didn't know how to resist. All he could do was scream. "Ah! She can't die anymore. She is not Wellington. She has countless flesh and blood scattered around the world. As long as the vampire is not dead, he can still be resurrected, and his true body is hidden in the dream. Even if all the flesh and blood outside is dead, the recovery time will be longer at most. That's all. But she is different. She had succeeded in relying on it, not only because there were not enough flesh and blood descendants scattered in other parts of the world, but also in the dreams she had placed on her, which had become unstable after she had died several times in a row. No. Clang. A ray of white light suddenly appeared in front of Garin, just blocking his extended right hand. A sigh slowly filled the air. What's strange is that when this white light collided with Garin's hand, a bloody crack suddenly appeared on his arm, as if the white light was extremely sharp. Garin felt his spirit was shaken, and his whole world seemed to be shaken. "Master!" He stepped back suddenly and instantly appeared at his original position on the ground, staring warily at the white light that suddenly appeared. "And he is a top master of spiritual nature." Garin's eyes finally became serious for the first time. After the white light flew around Tulan for a circle, it slowly fell to the ground and transformed into a handsome man dressed in white. "Can you let this poor junior go?" Lord Garin. There seemed to be a touch of sadness in the man's eyes, giving people a feeling of indecision. "Pale leader," Tulan behind him exclaimed. "Pale?" Garin was shocked. The strongest vampire in the world. The first dead apostle, Pale Costini. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 725. Garin's eyes were fixed on this man. He touched his face and chin. The edge of the mask was slightly scratched by the splash of white light, and it actually cracked. "Be careful, this guy is not simple," Hessaz whispered in his ear, "a top master of the spiritual system. I never thought that there would be a master of this level in this world." Garin nodded slowly, staring at this guy with the pupil of his left eye. White clothes, white hair, and even skin that is a little bloodless white, Pale Costini, one of the strongest vampires in the world. "It turns out to be His Excellency the First Death Apostle, Mr. Pale," Garin said slowly. As the leader of the Ming party, You actually show up to rescue the dead disciples of the secret party. It is really unexpected. Baiwan stood quietly on the branch of the tree, climbing up and down with Garen. The two faced each other 7 or 8 meters apart, and the entire surrounding space was faintly divided into two halves. He gently stroked Tu Ian's hair, with a complex look on his face. There have been no new death apostles in this world for many years. Every death apostle is the greatest wealth of my new humanity. He is the leader of the Ming party, and he has always been the leader who advocates that the vampire clan is the further evolution of mankind, and the death apostles in the vampire clan are the pinnacle of human evolution. Unlike the Camarilla believes that vampires are a higher species than humans, while the Ming party considers themselves to be a member of the human race. Unfortunately, that's your business, Garen said calmly. I have my principles, and you have your own approach. Bai was stunned for a moment, as if he didn't expect that even his own face was not of much use. If you insist on fighting, let me see how strong the first leader is. The moment Garen spoke, he raised his right arm, getting bigger and thicker, and then waved it violently. Boom! What was terrifying was that a large black shadow suddenly erupted from his right arm, like an extension of the arm, turning into a huge and slender hand, sweeping across. The arm is more than 10 meters long and is still extending. Bang 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 bang. A large forest dozens of meters wide was directly swept away by the huge black hand, creating a huge fan-shaped open space in the entire forest. Strangely, he found no trace of Costini, and it seemed that Tu Lan had also disappeared. This is a meaningless fight. Costini's voice came from all around. Garen snorted coldly, and quickly tapped his shoulders 10 times with the 5 fingers of his left hand. Coax. A group of black energy expanded and exploded again with him as the center. Third star. Open. His whole body seemed to expand even more. The blue-black meridians and blood vessels on his body were like twisted steel wires. His muscles were bulging high, as if they were cast from steel. At this time, he was already more than 2 meters tall, and it looked like a black metal giant. At the same time, his overall attributes also increased by an average of 7 points. Achieve the average quality of blackjack. With this terrifying improvement in perception, Garen finally caught an extremely subtle ripple in the surrounding space. Left. His left arm suddenly shot up, like a cannonball hitting the empty space on the left side. Boom. The giant blue-black hand fell hard on the seemingly empty space like a hammer. Suddenly there was a faint groan, as if something had been hit by this blow. The huge terrifying power suddenly caused high-frequency vibrations, making the air there a little unstable, and a subtle buzzing sound was heard. Holy Loflos! A clear voice sounded from the air. As the voice sounded, Garen's eyes suddenly shrank. Careful! It's a time nature ability. Hessaz reminded in shock, back off. Without any hesitation, Garen retreated quickly, like black lightning, retreating tens of meters away in the blink of an eye. The moment he retreated, a stream of white air suddenly rolled over and pursued him, forming a strange white human face in mid-air. The face opened its mouth and seemed to be howling, but there was no sound at all. Fourth star, Garen's body suddenly swelled, and he stood up again. He clasped his hands together and raised his head high. The secret of Waterbird Fist. White Jade. At this moment, his black-skinned hands turned into hand knives and slashed downwards. It actually drew the same white after image in mid-air. The black knife actually left a white after image. Different from the other two secret moves, Baiu does not have the majestic power of soaring, nor does it have the large-scale attack effect of the double sword. What it only has is to instantly increase the defense of the hands to the limit. The whole body's energy is concentrated on the hands. In a short period of time, the strength and hardness of the hands can be increased to an appalling level. With Galen's current physical fitness, if it is turned on the fifth star, the White Jade secret used, can have a terrifying effect that exceeds the body's limit by 30 points. This does not cross the body's limit, but only strengthens the surface hardness of the skin to an extremely high density, which is equivalent to shortening one's own flesh and blood. Time strengthens it into an inanimate substance like steel alloy, giving up activity to achieve extremely high strength. Because it has no activity, it cannot be considered to be within the limit of one's physical fitness. The effect of this move was not very obvious only against Nadia, so now it is the first time to use it in actual combat. But there is no doubt that the effect of white jade is powerful. What's even more terrifying is that his effect is continuous and can last for about 10 minutes at a time. The hand knives transformed from Garen's palms collided hard with the white air flying from the front. Ah! It was as if someone was screaming. At the moment of contact, Garen only felt a slight pain all over his body, and his whole body actually took 3 steps back. After the two palms collided with the white energy, they exploded at the same time. The white energy dissipated, and Garen also took several steps back to stabilize his body. There was nothing wrong with his palms, but the back half of his arms seemed slightly unruly. At this moment, directly opposite the direction where the white energy collided, Pale Costini and 2 Ian's figures slowly emerged in the air. He covered his mouth and seemed to be coughing, and there were faint traces of blood between his fingers. What a powerful force! I heard how powerful the Holy Fist Palace Fist Master was, and I thought it was just hearsay. I didn't expect, ahem. Costini coughed a few times. He stared at the young blond man opposite him. In his nearly 10,000 years, he had never seen such a powerful human being. Every time the opponent breathes, he can even hit small faint holes on the ground. The body heat radiating from his body is like a furnace. Just by being close, you can feel the powerful radiation pattern of his body temperature. The vibration of his random voice, maybe a little carelessness, can knock ordinary people out. At this level, it is no longer possible to call people. The blond man standing opposite has a mask on his face, with countless small black eyes carved on his forehead. He is 3 meters tall and has terrifying black and blue muscles that are extremely tyrannical. He looks like he is standing in front of a giant steamroller with his arms blocking the car. A feeling. Under the terrifying breathing sound, waves of air were sucked in by him, and then spurted out, creating slight whirlwinds around him. Just breathing could trigger the air and wind in this forest. Even Costini felt a little shocked at this moment. Compared to these new human vampires, the opponent is even less human. I thought there were no noteworthy strong men in this world. Garen spoke slowly. His voice was low, like thunder, and his body began to swell again. He can actually continue to improve. Costini's expression finally changed, and he took 2 steps back due to the airflow from the other party's words. Not only him, but Tulan behind him had a face full of shock and was completely speechless. She felt that when Garen spoke, the whole ground was shaking, which was the natural tremor of huge sound waves. Human cultivation has reached this point, and it has simply reached an inhuman state. Compared to Garen, she suddenly felt that vampires like them were much more normal. Coax. A huge airflow centered on Galleon and suddenly spread in all directions. Some tree stumps that were originally smashed were uprooted and blown away. And this, just because Garen took a step forward, caused the energy in his whole body to tremble. Pale Costini, Garen's remaining left eye, stared at the opponent quietly. You are qualified to see my strongest form. You, Costini wanted to say something, but suddenly he felt the ground shaking, like an earthquake. Let's show off. A terrifying roar of thunder exploded from right in front, and even the terrifying and powerful energy and blood in his body was shaken slightly. In just an instant, Costini saw a huge figure suddenly appear in front of him. The shadow of the terrifying figure of more than 3 meters covered both him and Tulan. At this time, the muscles on Garen's shoulders actually formed like shoulder armors, protruding outwards, and the muscles all over his body turned out to be like a set of terrifying and ferocious heavy armor, with an obvious metallic luster. He closed his palms towards him from left to right, as if he wanted to grab Costini directly, press him in the middle and crush him. The palms were actually bigger than his head, like two giant steel plates and iron walls, causing a terrifying whistling wind sound. Without any time to think, Costini retreated sharply. Holy law! Light! An ancient unknown language rang out from his mouth, and as the syllables echoed, his body speed suddenly increased, and there was a faint feeling that he turned into white light. This is similar to what he was in at the beginning. The white light was extremely fast and escaped from Garen's encircling attack with both palms in an instant. But that's it. Bang! Garen struck his palms together, and the terrifying sound waves erupted with extremely powerful concussions and explosions, slamming into Costini and Tolan. The two groaned in pain at the same time, staggering and falling on the grass not far away, with traces of blood flowing from their ears. Garen jumped forward, took a step, and actually crossed a few meters distance as if teleporting, appeared directly above Castan, and stepped down with one foot. With a loud bang, a ball of white airflow more than 10 meters high and dozens of meters wide exploded, instantly wrapping Galen in it. The airflow swept through everything around, including trees, soil, stones, and creatures. Even Tolan was blown away by the terrifying explosion, banging and breaking several large trees hundreds of meters away, before slowly rolling to the ground, covered in blood. Drenched, the whole person was on the verge of death. Fils Saint Garen. The white gas in the explosion gathered and formed the figure of a white-haired man, who was clearly Costini. He covered his mouth and couldn't hold it in any longer. His eyes, nostrils, and ears were all bleeding, and red blood dripped onto the white clothes on his body, staining the spots red. The blood did not flow back into his body, which meant that it had completely lost its activity. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 726. You must know that even if a vampire is injured and bleeds, the blood will flow back into the wound like a living thing to prevent the vampire from becoming weak due to the loss of blood. But now that Costini, as a death apostle, does not have such an instinctive healing mechanism, one can only imagine how terrifying Galleon is. Not only does it have a violent large-scale attack, but it also has a delicate technique that makes people desperate. Costini quietly looked at the center of the explosion, where the white air gradually dissipated, and at the core, a terrifyingly strong, monster-like human was finally revealed. Galleons. Costini's pupils shrank, and he didn't even see any sign of injury on Garen. Costini opened his mouth to speak, but suddenly found that his body suddenly hurt. Bang! His whole body actually exploded, and his upper body was turned into minced meat, splashing into the surrounding open space. The huge circular pit that had been flattened by the explosion was instantly filled with a large amount of red flesh and blood. Castan took a few steps forward with his lower body and finally fell to the ground. This is the terrifying thing about the water bird fist. You can't just block the opponent's attack and you will be safe. The greatest lethality lies in the moment it explodes after contact. Costini's flesh and blood quickly faded and disappeared, turning into traces of white gas that filled the air. Then the white energy quickly condensed in another place, reforming his body, and the white clothes were also condensed. Costini recovered all his injuries again and seemed to be intact, but he understood that such a death would be meaningless if his death left the other party unharmed. Even if you are a dead apostle, if you die too many times in a short period of time, your recovery will become slower and slower. There is a secret that only the dead apostles know. Regarding the mystery of the immortality of the dead apostles, it is true that the dead apostles are immortal. As long as they cannot find the place where their dreams are, they can be reborn forever. However, rebirth in the real world requires material energy, and synthesizing a flesh and blood body also requires energy and spirit, and it is not without consumption. If you die more than 10 times in a month, you will have to wait for a certain period of time before you want to be reborn. As you continue to die, this time will get longer and longer. From the first few minutes to the subsequent doubling, each death will double the time on the previous basis. Resurrection may take 1 minute at first, then 2 minutes, then 4 minutes, then 8 minutes, and it keeps adding up, no matter how many times it takes. This time will become extremely scary for a long time. It's not like no dead apostle has ever been dealt with like this in history. There were death apostles who were being guarded by other death apostles and were killed countless times in a row. In the end, the dead disciple completely fell into a dream and could never come back. Will not come back again. The place where he was resurrected was thrown into the core of a horrifyingly high-temperature volcano, and a powerful witch formation was engraved on it. He used witchcraft to suppress the destruction. As soon as it was time to resurrect, he was directly burned by the horrifying high temperature. After all, the newly revived flesh is extremely fragile. So no one remembers the existence of that dead apostle anymore. Perhaps by now, it has been thousands or even tens of thousands of years for him to die. Who knows, such an existence does not exist. Costini knew his situation. He had his blood core consumed by the secret party and had already consumed most of his blood essence. Even if he didn't consume it, he would not be a match for the monster human opposite him. If this continues, the situation will only become more and more unfavorable for him. Standing in the pit, the diameter of the entire pit reaches hundreds of meters. It is a white glass-shaped hole formed by several consecutive explosions. The bottom is directly flat. Costini stared at Galen on the opposite side silently. He believed that the state of the opponent's situation would not last long, and it would all depend on who could not hold on first. Garen also stared at Costini. The other party is indeed far less powerful than him, but his fifth star cannot exist for too long. Even now that the grimoire is about to be completed and he has obtained the Holy Phoenix Manual, it can only last for 5 hours. If the other party wants to delay tactics with him for 5 hours, that would be tricky. Because if he continuously explodes to the 5th star limit for 5 hours, his body will enter a period of weakness and exhaustion. If he doesn't spare any effort at that time, he won't even be able to activate the 7-star life secret point state, which will be very dangerous. Although the 4th star is much stronger than the opponent, the strength shown by Costini can already hurt the 4th star. Even if it can only cause a little injury, the cumulative effect of a small amount is extremely terrifying. After all, he is not a dead apostle and can constantly regenerate and recover. Once the opponent is not afraid of death and keeps accumulating injuries, no matter how minor injuries accumulate, they will become serious injuries. Garen also felt a little wary. His opponent is far less powerful than him, but his immortality is so disgusting. As long as you can break through a little bit of his defenses, add up a little and make a lot, and gather sand into a tower, it will become very difficult. There is really no need to fight between us. Costini's voice came from afar. The two were hundreds of meters apart at this time, but they seemed to be facing each other, which was indeed the case. For the two of them, this distance was only a blink of an eye. Garen's eyes moved slightly, and he stepped suddenly with his toes, picking up a piece of gravel and sending it flying with his hand. Whoosh! The stone flashed a line of red fire, friction in the air creating a fierce flame, and suddenly shot into the soil of a pothole behind the right side. A scream came from the soil, and it turned out to be Wellington's voice. After all, he failed to escape Garen's perception and died at his hands once again. Stop! Costini wanted to stop him, but it was too late, and a look of anger finally appeared on his face. I said, there is no deep hatred between us, and such a battle is completely unnecessary. Garen came back to his senses and looked at him, his eyes flashing slightly. A truce is okay, but I need you to reach an agreement. The people from the Holy Fist Palace and the Blood Clan will not attack each other in the future. No problem, Costini agreed directly without any hesitation. I have an additional condition. Garen raised his index finger. What conditions? Tell me. Costini really doesn't like fighting. He hates fighting from the bottom of his heart. In his opinion, it's not a big deal to stop the fighting at a small cost. I may not kill the disciple, but I want to take her away. Garen moved his finger to the left, pointing to the faint breath outside the pit in the distance. The master of the aura is Tu Lan. No, Costini flatly refused. With the ferocity shown by the other party, he was simply a cruel and tyrannical person. If Tu Lan was handed over to such a person, wouldn't it mean that he wouldn't have to think about escaping in the future? Garen's cultivation has reached an extremely terrifying level, and he cannot be judged according to human standards. Who knows how many years this guy can live? If it turns out to be the same as their vampire clan, then this descendant will be doomed from now on. You don't have to worry about me abusing her. I'm just interested in the mechanism of resurrection of the dead apostles. I won't intentionally torture her in the future. She is just a member of my Holy Fist Palace. You can observe her slowly. Garen seemed to expect it. When it comes to Costini's thoughts, although the other party is a super old guy with a long life, he is not a fuel-efficient lamp. A person who has lived for 3 lifetimes has experienced things that ordinary people cannot compare with. Costini was silent for a while. He had actually encountered extremely powerful witches trying to study the mystery of the Death Apostles' immortality before, but no one had succeeded. For the terrifyingly powerful human being in front of him, this might as well be an opportunity to take the initiative to penetrate inside him and gain a deeper understanding of why he is so powerful. If he can get his powerful root, it will be a huge victory for the vampires. Thinking of this, Costini also became active. Whether she is willing to be your subordinate or not depends on what she wants. He deliberately sent the voice of these words far away to Tu Lan. I do. I do, Tu Lan responded loudly from a distance, her voice sounding like she was crying. She burst into tears and curled up on the ground. Now she was trembling all over when she saw Garen. She was really psychologically affected by him. Several consecutive horrific deaths gave her a new understanding of Garen's cruelty. Now her thoughts are vaguely similar to Dam's, and Garen's figure has become an invincible obstacle in their hearts. Even if one day they reach a level of military strength that exceeds that of Garen, they will still be unable to exert their strength in front of Garen because of this magical barrier, and they will still be easily defeated by him. She had worked hard for so long to be promoted to Death Apostle, but she didn't expect to experience such a human tragedy just after she was promoted, and Garen would leave a deep mark on her heart. In fact, it's not just her, but also the dream creature she merged with. Now she is instinctively afraid of Garen. The union between the two of them was inherently unstable. After being beaten several times in a row, they were almost on the verge of life and death. If Costini hadn't arrived in time, I'm afraid the first real death of the Death Apostles would have happened next. I do, she screamed like a ghost, fearing that Garen's fist would suddenly appear above her head at the next moment. She was originally just an ordinary noble girl. After an accident, she was injected with blood core essence by a dying vampire and became a vampire. Then she joined the family and continued to accumulate strength step by step to become a high-ranking vampire. Until now, she has reached the level of Death Apostle. In fact, Tu Lan has always had an extreme sense of insecurity deep in her heart. This inexplicable sense of insecurity prompted her to continuously maintain her fighting power step by step, and she also continued to make progress in practicing the holy law. Only this kind of insecurity every time the feeling of progress all the time can suppress the insecurity deep in her soul. I originally thought that by becoming a Death Apostle, I would be able to kill everyone, and that I was one of the strongest people in the world, but I didn't expect to meet a monster like Garen. After many times of fruitless resistance, the deepest insecurity in her heart finally broke out, especially when she saw that even the pale Costini, the first vampire dead apostle, was unable to resist that man. People are instantly defeated by the shadow in their hearts and almost collapse. Just agree, Garen smiled with satisfaction. His fifth star state naturally shrank, and his taller height slowly decreased. In a few blinks of an eye, he returned to his original figure, completely losing sight of his previous terrifying figure. With a leap, he flew directly out of the pit and appeared next to Tulan. He gently grabbed the back of her neck and picked her up like a kitten. The first dead apostle, see you again when you have the chance. With roaring words, Garen grabbed Tulan and disappeared into the forest with a few leaps. The speed was astonishingly fast. Costini stood there watching Garen's leaving figure and let out a long breath. He knew that after this battle, the Holy Fist Palace would truly become one of the terrorist forces capable of protesting against the vampire clan. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 728. During the battle between the Death Apostles of the Holy Fist, some people said they saw the aftermath of the battle from a distance, and some countries used military satellite monitoring to detect powerful surface changes, but all information was naturally blocked. Only those who are deeply involved in it can know the core things. Garen of the Holy Fist Palace pursued Tulan Wellington. Tulan was promoted to a dead apostle on the way, and besieged Garen with the Wellington family leader, but was easily defeated by him. In the end, if the number one dead apostle had not intervened, the two of them would have been completely defeated there. This news came from within the vampire clan. Wan himself was out of trouble, and the first dead apostle personally acknowledged this fact. As the strongest dead apostle, if he hadn't personally taken action, the outcome of this battle would have been unpredictable. As soon as this news came out, the world was shocked. The entire vampire clan was shocked, whether it was the secret party or the Ming party. Various investigations into the Holy Fist Palace were quickly launched, and a lot of manpower and material resources were invested in trying to find out the real reason why this organization could become so powerful in just a few years. Technological means and mysterious means were all used. Rumors about the supreme boxing skills of the Holy Fist Palace finally began to spreading throughout the inner world. As long as you master the supreme boxing skills of the Holy Fist Palace, you will be able to obtain terrifying combat power that is as tyrannical as the vampires. Such rumors and legends are finally becoming more and more true. The secret party failed to suppress it. After the once strongest number one dead disciple escaped from trouble, the two parties finally sat down at the negotiating table again. Both parties ceased their activities. Under the huge pressure from the Holy Fist Palace and the wizard, they were finally no longer as good as each other. So merciless before. Although the fighting is still going on, it is no longer as fierce as it was at the beginning. Jia Long, on the other hand, took Tulan and others directly to the headquarters of Bailey Group, only to find that the building was already empty. Just as he was preparing to go to the original color headquarters, he immediately received an invitation letter from them. The person in charge of the Holy Fist Palace had been captured and would soon be sent to the fighting club for trial and compensation. Before facing the Holy Fist Palace, which is so huge that it can overwhelm the strength of the vampire clan, even the original color has to consider the possible price to pay for becoming an enemy. At this time, the fighting club's power network also began to grow larger and larger. After the second batch of students left, this huge power network connected every point in the world, like mushrooms after a rain, with a large number of tops popping up. Come. After the Death Apostle War, Garen's reputation as the Fist Saint of the Holy Fist Palace has gradually reached a supreme level, and some good people have already ranked him with the first Death Apostle of the vampire clan. Although most people don't know the details of the specific battle, being able to defeat the two dead apostles who joined forces and was finally forced to retreat by Baiwan has shown Garen's extremely powerful power. Holy Fist Palace. Snow capped the entire palace. At night, in the deserted martial arts performance hall, the flat black marble floor can even reflect the appearance of people. Garen sat in a high position in the hall, with his prisoner Tulan standing behind him. In front of him, on both sides of the hall, stood the top brass of the Fighting Club and Nighthawk. Dam, Hoseman, Quinton, Sidon, Ningruoxi, Nighthawk's bald head, and the second batch of Sith. Each of these people was vigorous, and each reported the situation they were responsible for in accordance with the old rules. It was Sidon who was speaking. Recently, as many as 423 people have been captured trying to steal my Holy Fist martial arts. Most of them are spies from various governments. They are probably either appointed by the vampires or are ambitious. Since the battle between the teacher and the Death Apostle, our reputation and status in the inner world have also been completely stabilized. Although the overall power is still not as good as that of the vampires and wizards, and the gap is far behind. However, in terms of high-end strategic deterrence, with teachers sitting in charge, no one dares to underestimate us. Under these conditions, everything is rapidly developing and getting better. What's the current situation between the two vampire parties? Garen nodded and asked calmly. Sidon bowed slightly and stepped back to the right. Quinton on the left stood up and reported. As for the inside of the vampire clan, we have learned from the vampire clan insiders we have controlled during this period that the situation between the two parties has greatly eased. Although there are still bloody conflicts, the casualties are much less than before. Presumably most of the reasons come from our threat. In addition, as for wizards, AG announced a retreat in the Honledo mountain in Asia. However, on that day, the Dark Witches were attacked by the vampires, and 3 important branches were pulled out. It should be the battle between the radicals in the vampires against Wellington. Revenge. I suggest that we should also be prepared for the possible counter-attack of the vampires. This is natural, Garen affirmed. Damn, have you made the specific itinerary for the sleepless face I need? Dam quickly stood up and nodded. It has been arranged. We will set off for the Memphis forest tomorrow. We have sent people to the Moon River there to conduct surveys. Preliminary judgment has determined several possible locations. I'll report the good news as soon as possible. Clear. Also, I heard that you joined the National Security Department and took up a position. Garen himself usually does not interfere in the affairs between countries, but Dam's own family is a powerful political family, so it is natural for him to join it and get a position. A special department, a newly established Special Response Bureau, with me as the official director, Dam replied respectfully. As the martial arts became more and more sophisticated, both he and Haseman felt more and more deeply that they were becoming powerful too fast, and they could not be used at all. It was abnormal, not just him, but everyone whose soul was planted by Garen progressed incredibly fast. Obviously, the only explanation for this is that the root cause is Garen, who used some method to make everyone improve and strengthen with him. After gaining this understanding, after a period of exploration, both Dam and Hoseman gradually understood that they seemed to be moving forward with the strength of Garan. Not mostly through one's own efforts. After gaining this understanding, the two of them finally had to let go of the little thoughts they had about the Holy Fist Palace. Naturally, there is also the reason why Garen does not compete with his subordinates for power at all. Almost all power is delegated to the subordinates. Apart from practicing penance and occasionally going out to resolve disputes a few times, Garen himself has no power at all and does not care about his subordinates. How people fight for power. In this way, the focus of the two people naturally shifted to competing with each other. One of their boxing methods is Yinjiquan, and the other is Yangjiquan. They are divided into 2 poles of water bird fist, and they naturally dislike each other. Recently, Hoseman finally managed to capture his beloved cousin, and he was even more furious when he learned that Dam sent someone to send her away. The fight between the two also began to gradually escalate. There is also the seventh mask, Hoseman. Do you have any clues there? Galen turned to look at Hoseman beside him. We already have some clues. Hoseman nodded. According to the informant's information, the seventh mask is probably in the hands of Cabu, chairman of Bailey Group. I have issued a wanted order to fully hunt Cabu and his assistant May. Dis. However, there has been no news from the two of them since some time ago. It is possible that they hid in advance after hearing the news. In this regard, you can go to the Dark Witch Guild. Isn't the representative they sent for help arriving soon? Garen nodded. You go and talk to them about the specific support. OK. Hoseman is now one of the permanent directors of the world's largest economic federation. Unlike Dam, he takes an economic route, and his influence is also growing. Even for the bi-monthly meeting at the Holy Fist Palace, I have to squeeze in time, and my schedule is densely packed on weekdays. The next Sith stepped forward and began to report on the development of the Fighting Society, some needs, and the benefits and support that could be provided to the Holy Fist Palace. The entire fighting club has developed and now has 3 large hotel chains, 5 private banks, and a media group distributed in several countries. This is a direct organization. Indirect organizations, that is, the forces held by members are spread over more than 30 countries and can influence the political power and economy of more than a dozen small and medium-sized countries. However, their influence on large countries is far from enough. That is the domain of vampires and wizards. But even so, the annual net income of Holy Fist Palace is around 30 billion euros. This is still the first year of development. The wealth recorded in Galen's name is over 100 billion, which is a jaw-dropping figure. Even Garen himself was startled when he heard it. He didn't expect that his wealth would develop so quickly. He only understood it after listening carefully to Sith's report on the reasons. Most of this wealth is half sold and half gifted by other forces, mainly to build relationships with fighting societies. Coupled with the support of the influence of members from all over the country, the development speed is even more amazing. A month has passed since the battle with the Death Apostles. In fact, only 1 year has passed since the establishment and integration of the Holy Fist Palace, and it has developed into such a huge monster in just 1 year. Tu Lan, who was standing behind Jia Long, also looked shocked. Listening to the reports from the powerful aura personnel below, she couldn't hide the shock in her heart. Not only are the abilities of each of these reporting personnel extraordinary, but the weakest among them are middle-ranking vampires, and there are actually 3 upper-level vampires. This kind of power has far exceeded that of ordinary veteran vampire families, reaching the level of the Death Apostle family. And this has developed in just a few years. Garen didn't seem to worry that the information she heard below would be leaked. He had no intention of hiding it and just let her listen on the sidelines. Is it because of the absolute suppression of strength? Tu Lan bit her lip. Palace Master, Miss Vivian is here to say that Mr. Emma and Ms. Therese would like to meet you. Suddenly, a voice of inquiry came from below. Suddenly, the entire martial arts hall fell silent. Garen sat on the high seat and was silent for a while. Reply her and I'll go back tomorrow morning. Okay. A subordinate below bowed slightly and stepped back. That's it for today's regular meeting. Zixi stays, Garen said calmly. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 729. Immediately, everyone below saluted, turned around and left quietly. Only Ningruoxi stayed, and she still looked like she did when she was a student. She wore tight white jeans and a white t-shirt that tied around her waist, highlighting her beautiful figure. However, his face was still a little pale at this time, obviously because the previous injury had not healed yet. She saw Tu Lan standing behind Jia Long, and he obviously recognized her, and his face looked a little ugly. However, since Garen was present, he didn't say much and just waited quietly for instructions. She is considered the most loyal to Garen among all members of the fighting club. She does not care about the control of the soul guide. On the contrary, Garen's help to her has improved her life too much. Although you will come into contact with some dark and bloody things, choosing Huan Lu Quan is often not as bloody as Shui Niao Quan, and supplementing Shui Niao Quan with Huan Lu Quan can easily reach the point where people cannot resist. This also formed her fighting style of not killing many people, but always without bloodshed. Garen did not force her. After all, unlike Damozeman and others, she was just an ordinary enthusiast who had learned some fighting skills in the East. If it weren't for her gratitude to Garen and the certain influence of soul introduction, I am afraid that Ningruoxi will not be able to adapt to the life and duties of the Holy Fist Palace at all. Jia Long stood up from his seat and waited until everyone else exited the martial arts hall before walking down. 1111 and Tu Lan quickly followed. The three of them walked directly towards the inner hall, where Garen and the palace members rested daily. Ningruoxi admired Jia Long very much and followed him firmly without wavering in her steps. Tu Lan only hesitated for a moment, but did not dare not to follow. "How far has your Huan Lu fist reached?" Garen asked as he walked. Zixi answered respectfully. "Only the last floor to reach the top." "Oh," Garen was slightly startled, "the progress is very fast. It seems that your qualifications are indeed very good." The three of them walked to a relatively dark corner, and Garen suddenly stopped and turned around. "I have something I need you to do." "Teacher, please give your orders." Ningruoxi quickly lowered her head and waited for instructions. "I want you to secretly protect someone in my hometown of Grandeur," Garen said lightly. Her lips opened again, and a name suddenly reached Zixi's ears. The latter was slightly startled, with a hint of disappointment in his eyes, but he immediately concealed it. "I will do your bidding. Among the several disciples, you are the one I am most worried about." Garen sighed. "Relax your whole body." Ningruoxi was slightly stunned, not knowing what the teacher meant. Suddenly, she saw Garen's palm pressing towards her chest like lightning. His face suddenly turned red, he suppressed his instinctive dodge movement, and closed his eyes slightly. Snapped. It seemed like countless sounds were mixed together to form a superimposed crisp sound. Garen's index finger slowly touched an acupuncture point on Zixi, and then slowly pulled it back. At this moment, Ningruoxi's chest felt hot, and her whole body suddenly felt as warm as if she was soaking in a hot spring. This feeling was fleeting and disappeared quickly. "I have left something in you. At a critical moment, when you encounter a life or death crisis, it will be activated automatically." Garen's voice came faintly. Disciple Ningruoxi suddenly knew that she had thought wrongly. Her face turned crimson and she turned her head slightly, her heart beating wildly. "Okay, go ahead." Garen patted her shoulder, "don't live up to my expectations of you." "Yes." Zixi nodded heavily, turned around as if fleeing, jumped a few times, and actually used secret weapons to quickly escape from here. "She likes you," Tu Lan whispered from the side. "Really?" Garen didn't seem surprised, and normal people could see Zixi's reaction. Tu Lan can also understand existences like Garen. With his supreme status, incomparable strength, and a face as handsome as the sun god, almost all the advantages that a male can have can be found in him. It's weird that no girls like him. Garen also knew what Zixi meant, but the little girl's mind was the most changeable. She was still young, and maybe she was just deceived by her body's instincts and didn't know what she really liked. She would really understand it when she matures in the future. Clear. It's still too early. This mission was actually a kind of training for Ningruoxi herself. After all, she didn't kill many animals, and she still seemed much more innocent. What Jialong left on her was the first star activation energy of his 7-star secret method. That bit of energy could provide Ningruoxi with a 5-minute first star burst at the critical moment, improving her entire physical fitness by 1 level. Times, but the price is that you will be exhausted for a whole day afterwards. This was to protect her. Among the major disciples, only Ningruoxi had the purest feelings for the Holy Fist Palace. You can go and rest. Garen glanced at Tu Lan. Remember, you are not allowed to leave the Holy Fist Palace area. I know. Tu Ian's face showed a hint of dejection. I can't leave even if I want to, right? A trace of soul attraction was planted in her body by Garen, and she couldn't resist the temptation and formally practiced Huan Lu Quan. Even the vampires, after practicing the Garan martial arts, still fell into ruin as expected. It is not simply because of the pleasure of practicing, but more because of the soul introduction that Jia Long must replenish himself every once in a while. If there is no soul guide to suppress the counter-attack of Huanlu Fist, even if she is a dead disciple, she will suffer from the sequelae of mental disorder, splitting headaches, and even amnesia. This is still a situation where she has not practiced deeply. But faced with the powerful pleasure of practicing Huanlu Quan, Tu Lan, who had been bored for thousands of years, couldn't help but sink deeper and deeper into it, practicing desperately every day without Galen's supervision. Garen also felt strange. Huanlu Fist originally did not have this effect, but after it was written into the magic book, it produced the same training pleasure and soul counter effects as Waterbird Fist. Like other secret martial arts, it has become a magic skill that progresses extremely quickly. He guessed that this was related to the nature of the grimoire. After Tu Lan left, Jia Long returned to his study alone. After closing the door, steaming hot freshly brewed green tea has been placed on the table. It is not filled with green tea leaves, but with many kinds of precious Chinese medicinal materials, all of which are great for replenishing vitality and blood. Just because of a certain the green color appears only when the amount of ingredients is high, but if this cup of tea were consumed by ordinary people, it would be an out-and-out poison. Its terrifying concentration can be seen from the strong fragrance that permeates the entire room. A normal person might get into trouble immediately after taking one sip. Garen was already used to it, so he picked up the teacup and drank it in one gulp. Is there any way to restore my right eye? He seemed to be talking to someone. After a moment, Hesaz's voice responded in a low voice. I have checked and found that the injury left by Nadia has a characteristic ability that is permanently missing. To put it simply, once you are injured and the overall loss and incapacity of your body's tissues and organs appear, it will never be repaired, so I'm afraid there's nothing I can do about your eyes. Garen gently touched his right eye. As a void stalker, can't I use the core of void creatures to repair my injuries? That's true, but that's just the injury of ordinary void creatures. Nadia's ability is more similar to gene erasure. It seems to attack one of your eyes alone, but in fact it targets all the cells in your body and directly cuts off all the genes related to the right eye in your cells, as if you never grew a right eye naturally. There is no need to talk about self-repair, Hesaz explained. A better way is to transplant, using the eyes of other organisms to parasitize the body and use them as your own eyes. Of course, this also involves brain modification, which is very troublesome and dangerous. Speaking of which, Nadia seems to have not appeared for a long time. Has she given up? Garen asked with a frown. Impossible. The silence for such a long time is probably brewing a more powerful offensive. You need to be prepared at any time. Hesaz directly denied Garen's speculation. As for your right eye, if you have to deal with your family's interrogation, your best solution for the time being is Huanlu Fist. Garen also understood this, sighed, and stopped talking. Move your eyes to your property bar. Galen Thomas. Power 7. Agile 7. Physique 10. Intelligence 11. Potential 7989%. Soul limit 30. For attributes above 10 points, 100 potential points are needed to improve 1 point. This terrifying demand has made Garen not upgrade new attributes for a long time. Simply save these potential points, and when you reach 100 points, increase your intelligence to 12 points to get a double whammy effect. but he hasn't had direct contact with his family for a long time, which is completely abnormal for a child. The right eye cannot be repaired, so we can only start with Huanlu Fist. The information on Huanlu Quan was recalled in his mind. He quickly moved his gaze to the skill bar below. Among the densely packed boxing skills, the icon of Huanlu Fist was clearly listed. Huanlu Fist, the first level, Forgetfulness, 4 levels in total. The mysterious and terrifying ancient boxing technique damages or shocks the opponent's brain nerves through sound and airflow concussions, achieving the purpose of strange mental confusion. It was once known as the most terrifying and mysterious boxing technique. Huanlu Quan is one of the top boxing techniques, so it naturally requires a lot of potential points to improve it. The practice principles of this boxing method are very complicated, and each level is as complicated and obscure as deciphering. It is impossible for ordinary people to master it without the qualifications and talents. But Garen was different. He had an average physical fitness of more than 7 points and an intelligence of 11 points. Both his memory and understanding reached an astonishing level. Coupled with your status as a researcher in Totem World, you have learned a lot of medical neurology content, so it is not a problem. In this way, the biggest level of Huanlu Fist will be easy for him. Many of these theories were merely novel and wonderful even to him. Advanced boxing skills, the level up should be 5 points. Garen's eyes stayed on the Huanluquan icon. 3 seconds later, the icon flashed and became clear again, and the words displayed changed. Huanluquan, the second level, psychedelic, 4 levels in total, prolongs the hallucination time and confuses the 5 senses. After looking at the potential points and removing 5 potential points, Garen continued to stare at Huanlu Fist without changing his expression. Now, except for the soaring in the secret of Water Bird Fist, which allows him to give full play to his strength, he really has no other ultimate secret move. Even the evil Phoenix soaring move was finally accomplished by integrating the Zifeng Fist. Otherwise, it would be impossible for a third-rate secret martial arts to reach that level. Now upgrading Huanlu Fist can also enhance his ability to fight enemies. After all, Huanlu Quan itself is also a mysterious advanced secret martial art. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 730. Soon, the third level was reached. The third level, Modification. Modification of memories, hallucinations. This level is already qualified to learn one of the powerful mysteries, the world of radiance, even for the perception of everything around it. This was the same trick that Ning Ruoxi had used on Tu Lan, dragging the enemy into her illusion world. Unfortunately, she was not mentally strong enough and was countered by the illusion ability of Tu Ian's blood clan, causing the world to collapse immediately. If it works, Tu Lan will continue to fight an immortal Ning Ruoxi in that hallucination. No matter how many times he kills her, she will be resurrected in full strength immediately. Until the final exhaustion, what is even weirder is that even if Ning Ruoxi is an illusion, she will still be injured once she is hit. This is a typical mental reaction affecting the body. Finally, there is the fourth level. Garen stared again for 3 seconds. The icon of Huanluquan finally blurred and became clear again. The icon actually changed slightly. Huanlu Fist, the fourth level, disappears. All enemies suppressed by Qi will temporarily lose consciousness and be controlled by the master of boxing. This effect is achieved spontaneously without control. Enemies who are directly touched by the body will fall into complete loss or lose part of the control of the body. Those with weak will fall into sleep forever and be brain dead. The ultimate secret, Afterlife, permanently controls a weak-willed person, making him obey forever from the deepest part of his heart. If he has not mastered it, the caster needs at least one Pearl Manhua seed. When he saw the effect of the final secret, even Garen felt frightened. The power of Huanlu Fist has reached a terrifying level. But the last material needed was the Zumanhua. Garen knew this kind of flower, but unfortunately it seemed that it didn't exist in this world. Instead, he had seen it in the catalogue of rare plants in the totem world. At this time, he suddenly discovered that the moves he often used now were mainly based on Water Bird Fist. This originally third-rate boxing method had reached a very high level in its profound meaning due to the fusion of Zifang Fist. The strange effect of the classics made his practice speed up too much. In the end, his power and practice cycle were greatly improved, making him finally reach the advanced level of martial arts. Only then did Garen realize that because what he had learned so far was too complicated, the 4 major killing moves originally created by the world of secret martial arts could no longer meet the needs of the current combat level, so that he was often unable to use his full strength to activate the 5th star. The mixed martial arts is a very troublesome thing, but this is for others. For Garen, he has sorted out the martial arts all over the body through the magic book, and the only problem is which secret weapon to choose. But now that there is the 4th level of Huanlu Fist, the power has been upgraded to a higher level, and there is one more direction to choose from. The afterlife is indeed very powerful and can permanently change a person's will, but for Garen, this cannot exert its power in actual combat. And it also requires rare activation materials. His martial arts style is hard on hard, absolutely domineering and fearless. The overall fighting style of Huanlu Quan is more based on mystery. It does not improve the physical fitness of the practitioner like other secret martial arts. It is just a means of powerful self-control to influence the enemy's spirit. There is no head-on approach. In this case, we still need to integrate the power of Huanlu Fist into our own martial arts system. Garen began to think deeply. He sat back where he had been writing the grimoire, took out a pen, and slowly turned it between his fingers. The power of the Huanlu Fist mainly depends on how strong the practitioner's will and spirit is. Apart from Nadia and the void creatures, who else do you think has as strong a spirit as you? Hessa said in a low voice. Indeed, Garen nodded, but the 2 sets of secret weapons are ultimately different. Only one secret weapon can be operated at the same time. This involves many overlapping meridians and blood vessels. Naturally, I cannot use it when operating the Water Bird Fist. Huanlu Quan, this is because my physique is strong enough to be able to practice 2 secret martial arts at the same time. It is also because Huanlu Quan and Water Bird Quan have very few overlapping blood and meridians. If it is an ordinary person, the meridians and blood vessels will not be able to be exercised long ago. There is a hidden injury. Garen frowned. Then can you try fusion? Hessas prompted. Fusion. Garen suddenly recalled that when he was in the world of secret martial arts, he continued to fuse various martial arts, and finally achieved an extremely terrifying effect. You can try this. His eyes fell on his skill bar again. Water Bird Fist has reached the 4th level of Dachan, and all 3 mysteries have been mastered. The Huanlu Fist simply reaches the 4th level, and there is no condition for the strongest secret to be used. Garen's eyes moved a few times on the 2 secret martial arts, and as his thoughts merged together, the icons of the 2 martial arts trembled slightly, and a wonderful change occurred. Both icons began to glow red, beating like hearts. One was stronger and the other was weaker, as if they were competing to see who was in charge. After a while, what surprised Garen was that the red light of Huanlu Fist, which was a top-notch boxing technique, actually dimmed, and was suppressed by Shui Diao Fist, which was only a third-rate boxing technique. The Huanlu Quan icon began to blur gradually, and together with all the subsequent rune explanations, the blur disappeared. Instead, the Water Bird Fist icon became increasingly scarlet. It was as if it had been smeared with blood. Snapped. There was a small sound, like the sound of a steel wire breaking, and Garen clearly saw that Huanlu Fist had completely disappeared. The icon of Water Bird Fist has undergone new changes. Phantom Water Bird Fist, the 4th level of Dachan, 4 levels in total. The top martial art formed through the fusion of biphase water bird fist and Huan Lu Quan can influence and shake the minds of others with every move. It has 4 profound meanings. The ultimate secret, the bliss of rebirth. Such a new secret martial art is no longer a purely enhanced martial art like before, but is the result of the complete fusion of 2 secret martial arts. There are not many overlapping meridians between Huan Lu Quan and Shui Niao Quan. There are more meridians and blood vessels that do not overlap with each other. In this way, they form the greatest degree of complementarity. The 2 martial arts merged into a brand new martial arts. But Garen circulated his energy and blood according to the new secret martial arts, and felt that the blood vessels used in the secret martial arts on his body did involve the meridians and blood vessels of both secret martial arts. The only troublesome thing was overlapping bloodlines. No matter how little overlap there was still a dull pain in 2 of the blood vessels. One is the center of the inner side of the left elbow, and the other is a little lower from the middle of the back. These 2 places happen to be where this new secret weapon uses the most blood for its operation. If the original 2 secret martial arts had to use the blood of this place once, then the fused secret martial arts would have to be used twice, which invisibly doubled the physical load. Even my physical condition makes me feel uncomfortable. It seems that this new secret martial art is not suitable to be taught to others. I can only practice it myself, Garen said with a frown. Can you try to modify it a little bit, Hesaz suggested. I'm afraid not. Garen shook his head. These 2 overlaps are very critical and cannot be replaced. This can be considered a gain and a loss. Hesaz smiled as a comfort. You can find a place to test your power. Garen nodded, stood up and walked out of the study. He walked along the corridor slowly but quickly, covering a distance of more than 10 meters in a few steps. Passing through the student martial arts hall, there were still students practicing hard in secret at such a late hour. Garen glanced with satisfaction and found that there were only a few students who were progressing very slowly, and he was slightly relieved. After the training of the second batch of students, the new students of the third batch are no longer under his direct control, and there is no need for him to directly control this batch of students. Only the 3 highest level disciples, Hoseman, Dam, and Zixi, were allowed to personally select and control the selection, and the rest was left to Quinton Sidon and others to select. You must know that all the first batch of students in his fighting club, who have practiced secret martial arts to a certain level, can release a trace of soul attraction for others. Although it is much weaker than Galen, it can still exert a certain degree of control. Effect. This also helps each person develop their own strengths. Quietly passing through the martial arts hall and several palaces, Garen soon arrived at the pet breeding area. This is a circular blank hall area, with various cages of various sizes, some empty and some full, with cats and dogs barking from time to time. The temperature of the air conditioner is also turned on relatively high, unlike other areas where it is turned on relatively low to train students. Garen followed the cages and selected them one by one. Soon I stood in front of a cage with a litter of white kittens. I didn't know it was the pet brought by the student. There were 3 kittens in this litter, all pure white. They looked like 3 cute balls of wool. Sensing Garen's approach, the 3 palm-sized kittens meowed softly and huddled together, seemingly very frightened. Garen smiled and stretched out his finger, lightly touching the cage. Clang! An invisible ripple vibrated from the point where his finger touched the iron cage. The ripples quickly spread to cover the 3 kittens, and then disappeared silently. The iron cage banged, and the metal bar was broken by the terrifying finger force of the water bird fist, revealing a hole big enough for the kitten to get out. But the 3 kittens seemed not to have seen the hole at all, and remained motionless in their nest. Garen then stood up with satisfaction. The phantom water bird fist seems to be able to roughly affect the animals, although it is not very strong. He looked at the kitten's eyes, and it seemed that he didn't see any damage to the cage at all, and he still felt like he was still in the cage. Mean. What's commendable is that this effect was not intentional on my part, but a naturally occurring hallucination effect. I just don't know if it will be effective on void creatures. You can take the initiative to try it with Nadia, and by the way, you can also test her current movements, Hessa suggested. Good idea. Garen also agreed. Nadia had been silent for so long, and it obviously felt like the calm before the storm. He stood up, left the pet area, and walked towards the secret room in the palace. After he left, the three kittens remained huddled in the nest motionless. The strange thing was that in the image reflected by their eyes, the cage railings were intact. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 731. It was still the empty hall, with the painful human figure stuck to the center of the wall, entangled in countless green mesh threads, unable to escape, and could only be seen struggling in pain. On both sides of the hall are rows of tall statues, all of which are white human figures holding giant swords in both hands, giving people a solemn feeling. Garen stood in this hall again. He was standing in front of the wall with the huge green net. He stretched out his hand to gently touch the green net, but unfortunately, there was still a gap between the net and his hand. A layer of clear, hard glass. He had tried breaking it, but to no avail. This layer of glass was far harder than any material he could imagine. Garen looked around, and the walls and floor of the hall were covered with a layer of dust. It seemed like no one had arrived for a long time. Nadia, he shouted in a low voice. No one responded. The sound echoed in the empty hall. Garen frowned. This was not the first time he came to this dreamland. This was the 8th time he had entered here. In the past, he would have a life and death battle with Nadia here every once in a while. Similarly, as long as he takes the initiative to enter here, he will definitely meet Nadia and appear at the same time. But this time, strangely enough, there was no projection. Is it possible that she won't show up? Hessa's voice sounded. Perhaps he was caught up in something else, Garen guessed. Maybe. Garen frowned, he had a bad feeling. At the foot of the Holy Fist Palace. Small town. A white car slowly parked in front of the small building where the Gallon family lived. Under the sun, the car door opened, and a handsome man with hair as bright as gold stepped out of the driver's seat. The man was wearing a white suit, and his slender body gave people a plump and well-proportioned feeling. He smiled and looked at the cute girl running out of the small building. Little Vivian. Brother, welcome home. The girl's slim and youthful figure jumped into Garen's arms, and he picked her up and spun her around. Mom and Dad are waiting for you inside. Vivian looked very happy. Garen raised his head and saw his father Emma with a serious expression from the window on the second floor. He smiled and strode towards the small building. Around the car behind him, unknowingly, cars of various colors slowly stopped. Some people got out of the cars concealedly, and began to surround the small building with tighter protection. Walking into the door of the small building, Garen saw a large table in the middle, covered with a black cloth, and he didn't know what was inside. Bang! Suddenly, a frightening explosion sounded from behind, and then when he wasn't paying attention, a large cloud of colorful spray sprayed all over his body with a hiss. The younger sister Vivian, the older brother Jason, and Arissa were also there. Even the mother Tris was childlike and started spraying Garen with colorful spray. After a burst of spray, Garen's entire body turned into a weird man covered in various colored spray strips. Happy birthday! A chorus of shouts immediately echoed throughout the room. The black cloth was lifted, and inside was a half-meter high birthday cake, with pink cream written on it, Happy 21st birthday to Gallon. There was no expression on Garen's face that was spray-painted, but there was an indescribable feeling in his eyes. In fact, he had birthdays in both the secret martial world and the totem world, but it was so grand and strange. It was his first time feeling this. "There's no need to go to such trouble," he whispered, but his voice was drowned in everyone's laughter. At this time, everyone was in a mess, each holding a colorful spray gun and spraying everywhere, spraying everyone he caught without paying attention to anything, chasing and fighting into a chaotic mess. Garin shook his head helplessly, walked to the sofa, sat down, and wiped the spray strips on himself. By the time everyone was tired, the room was in a mess. Fortunately, the cake was protected by a large glass cover, otherwise the cake would have been covered with a lot of colorful spray paint. Today is Galen's birthday. Let's sing a celebration song for him together. Instead of singing Happy Birthday, sing this song I adapted. At this time, Tries didn't act like a mother at all, but like a big child. Shouted. In their eyes, Garen's eyes were still normal, and there was no mask on his face, just like before. Click. A camera sound rang out. Garen's eyes jumped, he stood up and walked to his sister seemingly slowly. I remember, isn't this camera broken? As he moved his fingers gently, the camera vibrated quietly, and something unknowingly changed. It seemed normal on the surface, but in fact the memory card inside had been damaged by the vibration. Is it bad? Then I'll take a photo with my phone, my sister Vivian said strangely. No need to go to such trouble. Garen picked up the little girl and threw her on the sofa, laughing amidst her screams. Suddenly everyone started messing around again. No one noticed that in the faint reflection on the black screen of the TV, Garen's face seemed to be wearing that weird and mysterious mask. Memphis Jungle, Moon River. As the largest tropical jungle in the world, the Memphis Jungle is home to countless mysterious and unknown areas. Even the top scientific research team has not fully explored the secrets here. There are various poisonous insects, swamps, traps, natural psychedelic terrain, strong geomagnetic interference, and even powerful ancient beasts surviving in it. A scientist who once had a vampire identity led a team here, threatening to complete the exploration of the entire Memphis jungle and make a great contribution to world geography. However, after losing most of his manpower, his scientific research team finally had to tragically escape from it. Evacuate. He himself even almost died on several occasions, but after paying such a heavy price, all he got was not without gain. He successfully explored nearly one-third of the Memphis jungle. And damn, now leading a team of elite men under his command, the route forward is the same route that the scientific research team took back then. The surroundings were densely covered with tropical plants, and various poisonous insects were flying around. From time to time, a large group of blood-sucking mosquitoes buzzed and flew around everyone. There are also red cicada-like poisonous insects that occasionally jump down from the top of the head and burrow into people's necks. The spider's web was hidden in the grass at the foot of the front. Every once in a while, some team members encountered a spider whose web was torn and tangled all over their legs. Thousands of birdsong kept coming from overhead, including many ferocious birds. Careful! One of the team members reached out and squeezed, and a green line that silently fell down from mid-air was immediately and accurately caught by him. It was a small green snake with a green body, but the triangular snake head made it clear that it was a highly venomous snake. After pinching off 7 inches of the snake, the team member who was targeted by the snake thanked his friend who reached out. Such things kept happening during the 9 hours we entered the jungle. Everyone was on alert to be on guard against possible dangers around them. Dam was walking in the middle of the team, holding a map in his hand. There was an extremely strong geomagnetic field here, and any metal or electrified tools would be seriously disturbed. There is the second Moon River ahead, everyone, be careful, Dam said loudly. Oh! Everyone responded loudly. In addition to environmental interference, when they approached the first Moon River, they encountered a highly poisonous pied scorpion. This scorpion is only the size of a palm, but it is extremely fast. It jumps out almost like lightning. Often the moment one notices its appearance, the person has already been stung. Even Damu can only match the burst speed of this scorpion, which is simply terrifying. As a high-level person, he could only reach the same speed as this creature. This made him feel aggrieved, but he also deeply understood the horror of this jungle here. After passing several big trees that were so old that they had no idea how long they lived for hundreds of years, the front suddenly opened up and a narrow river appeared like a silver ribbon. The river has a curved shape, hundreds of meters long and 20 to 30 meters wide, like a perfect sickle crescent moon. The sun shines on the river from above, reflecting the sparkling waves, and the golden color shines, making it beautiful and charming. The second moon river dam felt slightly relieved. Raising his hand, "Be alert. Disperse and pay attention to the gaps in protective clothing." Under his command, a group of people began to slowly spread out and circled along the edge of the moon river. "Why do you feel something is wrong?" Dam suddenly felt that something was wrong with the second moon river, but he couldn't tell what was wrong. Watching their men searching everywhere along the river bank, they found that the magnetic field here was relatively weak and instruments could be used. They took out plastic detection instruments and began to search quickly. "Mr. Dodum, you have to ask everyone to pay attention. I'm afraid there are some ferocious beasts here. There are no animals coming to drink water by the river." The female tour guide who was forcibly invited reminded with a trembling voice. Along the way, she had seen horrific scenes of Dam going berserk. "There are no animals drinking water," Dam disagreed. "I guess there are just more crocodiles. What are there to be afraid of?" He glanced at Moon River, his brows still slightly furrowed. He could feel that this was not the source of his feeling that something was wrong. According to the speed of their group, this place has actually gone deep into the Memphis jungle, reaching the deepest area where the deepest scientific research team was. But until now, he has not encountered any terrifying murderous intention that can threaten the vampires. Wait. Threaten the vampires? Dam suddenly seemed to think of something. If it weren't for the danger encountered along the way, then the only possibility would be a terrifying murderous intention encountered all at once. Coax. Amidst the violent sound of water, huge behemoths with black shadows rushed towards the team members on the shore like lightning. Be careful, Dam actually encountered a terrifying creature that rushed towards him. The huge wind pressure actually made him feel slightly suffocated. Ah! Amidst a series of screams, his men suffered heavy casualties in an instant. The female tour guide was even swept into the river by the giant beast's tail. Immediately, dark red masses emerged from the river. It was obvious that she would not survive. Damn low-level creatures. Hearing a series of screams, Dam's face showed ferocity, and he rushed forward, his right hand turned into a hand knife and slashed at the approaching giant beast. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 732. Tisk tisk tisk. 3 consecutive streaks of blood light suddenly appeared, and the 3 giant beasts exploded with a bang, turning into 3 groups of blood mist and flying away. Dam wiped off the blood on his face and rushed towards the other team members around him like lightning. Only the elite team members were still struggling with the giant beast at this time, while the others had already been severely injured or swept into the water. Bang 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 bang. Amidst several consecutive violent explosions, giant beasts exploded and turned into blood mist. Dam rescued the tour guide and another team member who had been swept in from the water, and the sound of machine guns roared. Only then did everyone see clearly what the giant beast in the water looked like. It was a giant black beast that resembled a hippopotamus, but their heads also had 2 horns like buffaloes. The body is about 3 meters long and looks like a giant hippopotamus. Moreover, there is a huge crocodile-like tail behind their bodies, which is covered with scales and looks extremely scary. But these giant beasts were like chickens waiting to be slaughtered under Dam's hands, one at a time, and soon they suffered heavy casualties. More than 20 of them were killed in a row. Roar! Suddenly, the soil behind Dam suddenly opened up, and a huge black beast with a height of 5 meters suddenly came out and pounced on Dam's back. The speed is like a huge black wave, and the black soil and dead branches and leaves stirred up bring a strong rotten smell. Dam turned around suddenly, just in time to see the giant beast pounce down, and his eyes were suddenly filled with the entire body of the giant beast. His pupils tightened, and he saw a strange mask embedded in the belly of the giant beast. That mask looks so familiar. Call. A strong gust of wind blew by, and Garin appeared on the high seat in the living room and sat down slowly. On the seat on the right below, there is a white man and woman sitting in white gauze. His eyebrows are dotted with a little cinnabar, which seems to be very similar to the Indian style. On the left seat were two subordinates from AG, both young witches wearing tight black skirts. The mask Garin was wearing had turned completely silver for some unknown reason, and the densely packed small eyes on his forehead looked more and more vivid. Through the eyes of the mask, he quietly glanced down at both sides. "How is AG's retreat?" "It seems to be going well," Garin said in a low voice. "Lord Holy Fist, Lord AG's retreat is currently going well. The reason why we came here this time is to hope that the Holy Fist Palace will assist me in the Dark Witch Guild." The leading witch stood up and answered solemnly. "As for the assistance, for the sake of AG, I can agree. You and Hoseman can negotiate the arrangements for dispatching forces. In addition, in exchange, I also need some help from you." In exchange, Garin nodded lightly. Actually, he had never been on good terms with Nizra, the leader of the Dark Witches, so it was naturally impossible for him to help for free. We are now in a relatively balanced state with the vampires. Breaking the deadlock first may lead to unpredictable consequences. Garin turned his eyes to the other side, to the white representative from the main force of the witches. "Then, you claim to be here on behalf of the Witches Association and declare your purpose." The white man draped in white gauze stood up with a smile. He bowed to Garin calmly and clasped his hands together. "I come here with the friendship of the Lion Mother. Maybe Lord Holy Fist needs my lord's help." "Oh," Garin was slightly surprised. "Tell me, what help do I need?" The white man did not answer, but gently touched his right eye with his hand. Garin narrowed his eyes slightly. "Is there any way you can restore my eyes?" "It's not me, it's my lord." The white man bowed his head and said respectfully. Garin fell silent, seeming to be thinking about something. "Is there any way you can prove that you can have this ability?" He spoke slowly after a long time. Even Hesaz was powerless. For the mother of lions in this world, the level of this kind of injury was beyond her imagination. Nine-headed dragon King Nadia's injuries are not easy to treat. And the most important point is that you must have made a lot of preparations to take the initiative to treat his injuries, so in exchange, the other party must have a lot to offer. The only person in this world that Garin is afraid of now is the first dead disciple, Baiwan, and the rest are just ants. Only paleness can threaten him. But this is a force on the vampire side, and he really doesn't have much contact with witches and wizards. There is also a lack of understanding of their methods. When the white man heard Garin's question, he smiled slightly, took out a white lotus as white as snow from his arms, and gently tossed it, and the white lotus immediately turned and flew towards Garin. Gently catching the flying lotus, Garin took a deep breath and felt that his mouth and nose were filled with a strong fragrance, giving people a feeling of relaxation and joy. And the most important thing was that his right eye actually felt a slight pain, which made him feel terrified. The Lord hopes that if your injury can be cured, the Holy Fist Palace and the vampire clan can coexist peacefully and non-aggression. This world can no longer withstand more bloodshed. There was a look of compassion in the white man's eyes, and Garin could see that it was not a disguise, but a real feeling. "A ceasefire? I don't have any objection, but I'm afraid the vampires won't be willing to do so," Garin said calmly. His overall strength is far weaker than that of the vampires, so a truce is naturally only good for him and he will definitely not refuse. On the vampire side, naturally there is a master who will come forward to persuade. The white man nodded. In addition, the Lord has one more request as a cure for your eyes. Oh? What's the request? Come and hear it. Garen remained calm. For the mother of lions, the only death apostle level existence among the witches, it was obviously not ordinary for the entire vampire race to be able to do nothing against her. Roll. Even the other party's method was able to have some effect on the injuries caused by Nadia, which was obviously beyond his expectation. My lord, I hope you can stop collecting sleepless faces. The white man bowed his head and said respectfully. The atmosphere instantly became a little heavy, and Garen's body exuded a trace of depressive aura. This aura was so powerful that the hearts of the people below felt as if they were wearing a set of heavy shackles, and they felt a little breathless. The white man seemed to remain calm and continued with his head lowered. The sleepless face is the source of trouble and will bring endless disasters to the world. I hope Lord Holy Fist can give up collecting it. The atmosphere became more and more solemn. Garen sat motionless in his high position, just staring calmly at the white man. It was clear that the other man's heart was suppressed by his courage, and even breathing seemed difficult, but he still insisted on standing in the hall without changing his expression. In the middle, he remained still and maintained etiquette. This seems to be supported by a will similar to faith. Let's wait until your master can heal my right eye. Garen finally spoke slowly, and the strong sense of depression finally slowly dissipated the moment he spoke. I will convey your message. The white man bowed his head and said respectfully. After the representatives of the Witch Guild and the Lion Mother left, the living room of the Holy Fist Palace fell into silence again. Horseman and Quentin come out of the corner. Teacher, the main body of witches represented by the Lion Mother has always regarded themselves as defenders of world peace. They are all pitiful and merciful. They have come to tell me all before, which is very annoying. I am afraid that this visit is not just a simple ceasefire persuasion. Quentin frowned and said, as the person in charge of intelligence now, she also has a certain understanding of the main body of the witch's power, the largest backstage Lion Mother. This group of people have been pretending to save the world all day long, but in fact they have no idea what their purpose is behind the scenes. They can't be trusted easily. Haseman also nodded slightly. Garen tapped his fingers on the armrest of the seat, seeming to be thinking slightly. I know. The collection of sleepless faces is impossible to stop. This mask can not only provide him with potential points, but also block Nadia's coordinate aura coming here. No matter what, it is a secret treasure that must be collected. It's just that the Lion Mother's mysterious method can actually affect the injury to her right eye, which makes Garen feel a little alarmed. He turned the white lotus in his hand. The trace of breath just now was gone. The flower now was just the most ordinary white lotus. The little feeling I had in my right eye has disappeared again. Mother of lions. Garen sniffed the lotus, with an inexplicable look in his eyes. Outside Holy Fist Palace. The white man slowly advanced on the mountain road going down the mountain, past the outermost gate of the Holy Fist Palace, smiled at the two guards guarding the door, and then walked down the steps gently and quickened his pace. After walking a long distance, he turned back and looked at the Holy Fist Palace from a distance. The White Spire Palace is towering and precipitous inlaid on the top of the snow peak. It looks like a legendary mythical holy land. Outside the palace gate, groups of people wearing cloaks enter the palace gate one after another and hand over passes. One by one, these groups, they are all students who have been selected from various places and brought to the Holy Fist Palace for training. They are either from the fighting club or from Nighthawk. Each one of them has strong chi and blood. Even in this icy and snowy weather, they give people a sense of security. A feeling of strength and lightness. What surprised the white people even more was that on their way down the mountain from the Holy Fist Palace, halfway up the mountain, they actually encountered a group of pure vampires and vampires coming to meet them. The aura on them seemed to have undergone some strange changes. It was stronger than before, but also weirder. The Lord is right, the Holy Fist Palace is the source of all turmoil. The white man raised his head and looked at the gray sky. The unimaginable sense of depression and the faint thunder flowing through the clouds further accentuated the feeling. There is a huge momentum here. Whether human or vampire, the tentacles of the Holy Fist Palace are continuously spreading to some corners of the world. And this spreading trend is still accelerating. An inexplicable sense of panic suddenly arose in the white man's heart. He recalled the people he had met since coming down the mountain, whether they were vampires or humans. Deep in the eyes of these people, there was a strange sense of fanaticism, which was an absolute reverence and yearning for the Holy Fist Palace. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 733. Chapter 733 Change 2. He didn't know how this mentality could spread so quickly in a short period of time, but he knew that if it continued like this, the situation would develop into an extremely troublesome situation. Little did he know that his hunch was indeed correct. The most powerful point of the Holy Fist Palace, and the most inescapable point, is the strange pleasure of practicing from the magic book. After practicing in that kind of pleasure, you can continue to evolve and strengthen yourself. Such a perfect path forward is simply impeccable. It is a perfect fit for modern people's mentality of being eager for success and unable to endure any hardship. In the supreme enjoyment, they can continue to strengthen themselves. Many people even don't care whether they become stronger or not. Just the pleasure of practicing makes them want to stop. This is the most terrifying place in the Holy Fist Palace. This kind of practice has been widely publicized through advertisements in the world fighting competition organized by Hosman and Dam. The two marshals under the Holy Fist Palace each created their own boxing branches. Together with the 3 secret martial arts schools in the Holy Fist Palace, there are a total of 5 branches of boxing, which are called the 5 King Boxing by keen boxing enthusiasts. It means that the king of boxing is incomparable. Each of these 5 boxing techniques will produce a strong sense of joy when practicing. Then under the guidance of Garin, Dam, and Hosman once again simplified and graded their boxing techniques, forming a complete structure of lower-level boxing techniques. There are almost a dozen intermediate and low-level boxing techniques derived from the 5 King Fists. Most of these boxing techniques have the ultimate goal of achieving a certain level of specific effects in the 5 King Fists. The training conditions are simple and there is a certain amount of pleasure, but it is not very strong. After such intermediate and low-level boxing techniques were widely distributed to the outside world, the fans who tasted the benefits immediately became fanatics and spontaneously promoted the Holy Fist Palace everywhere. During the practice, not only can you be extremely happy, but you can also strengthen yourself and your body. Once you are successful in practice, you can get support from major economic organizations under the Holy Fist Palace and get a job with a good salary. The most important thing is that once your practice reaches a certain level and you achieve something, you may even get appreciation from the warrior level, join the fighting club, and become an official member of the Holy Fist Palace. Then you will be qualified to truly contact higher levels. More powerful punches. This welfare system, which was like an upgrade, immediately attracted countless elite talents to come and participate in the practice. After practicing the low-level simplified boxing techniques commonly used, they couldn't stop. Some of the elites who had actual combat experience understood the powerful skills contained in this simplified boxing technique. Under the influence of their words and deeds, the power of the Holy Fist Palace became even more powerful. It's like the sun is rising. Time flies, and months pass in the blink of an eye. The power of Holy Fist Palace is like a snowball, expanding rapidly. Almost the entire United States has been completely occupied by the extremely simplified boxing techniques of the 5 Kings of Holy Fist Palace. Even fighting enthusiasts from other countries have come here to learn boxing. After learning boxing for a period of time, the skills and content contained in it have triggered a new wave of evolution in fighting martial arts. Suddenly there was a fighting craze all over the world. During this period of time, the Vampire Secret Party and the Ming Party finally reached a temporary reconciliation. After a recent major battle, the two parties finally sat down and started serious discussions under the mediation of the Lion Mother. Faced with the huge threat from the Holy Fist Palace, the two parties finally put aside their hatred for the time being. During this period of time, Garan lived in seclusion, and the Holy Fist Palace was actually controlled by the two marshals Hoseman and Dam. Their strength came from Garan's strength. After understanding this, the two no longer had too much hope. Being out of control was due to Garen's inaction and failure to take power, which made the two of them not too resistant to the fact that they were being controlled. The strength of the Holy Fist Palace is getting stronger and stronger, and the power under the two men is also getting stronger and stronger. Similarly, the following four people in power are also becoming more and more powerful, and they are assigned to sit in various branches of the Holy Fist Palace. Occupying the entire United States, Dam's forces even began to enter the army, spreading a simplified version of the Death Water Bird King boxing technique. If the firearms were not an extremely dense heavy machine gun fire network, or a machine gun fire network with no blind spots, Dam's elite men would be almost undefended. Of course, large-scale artillery bombings cannot be resisted, but the practice of boxing not only improves the combat effectiveness of individual soldiers, but also improves the physical fitness and five senses of the human body. The simplified version of the Shadow Secret martial arts is a flawless and terrifying training method for long-range arms. It fully covers most arms in the army, both at a distance and at a distance. The willpower and physical fitness of ordinary people are naturally inferior to those of army soldiers, and the most important thing is that soldiers themselves are psychologically prepared for the resistance to battle. There will be no resistance to being sent to fight. This greatly alleviated the embarrassment of insufficient manpower in the Holy Fist Palace in the face of friction between vampires and witches. After all, Garen's soul attractor can only control a few people, and Damu and Hoseman's soul attractors can't be used on too many people. In this way, only Nighthawk and two people are left who really dare to fight to the death. Desperados in the hands of others, but the number of these people was too many casualties in the Battle of Wellington. Now the addition of the army has greatly alleviated the embarrassment of the Holy Fist Palace. Especially after some hot-blooded young officers joined in enthusiastically, the power of the entire Holy Fist Palace expanded rapidly. Garen has been aiming at the human control technique of the vampire clan for a long time. Based on Huanlu Fist, he has created some methods and trained on the principles of this control technique. After successful experiments, he has achieved an effect that is close to immunity to low-level control techniques. If you are a determined person, you can directly ignore the ordinary level of this control technique. Under such circumstances, most of the top human beings who had been suppressed by the vampire slaves finally saw the hope and dawn of counterattack, and joined the Holy Fist Palace one after another. Because of the long-term oppression, the accumulated oppression suddenly exploded. The huge power of the Holy Fist Palace began to oppress the vampires. After the two vampire parties experienced a great war, they suffered heavy casualties, and the middle and lower levels were unable to resist at all. During this oppression, in addition to the two parties, many vampires who lived in seclusion and were unwilling to join the chaos were also brutally persecuted. Run! Amid rapid breathing, several figures ran quickly through the large bamboo forest in the darkness, with more than a dozen fast figures closely chasing behind them. These chasing figures all have vigorous movements and long and rhythmic breaths. They all hold black submachine guns in their hands. There is a sharp bayonet in front of the muzzle, which can be used as a melee weapon. On a hillside not far away, a group of soldiers in black special operations uniforms guarded two young officers. The two officers used infrared telescopes to look at the situation in the bamboo forest in the distance. These damn bastards! They dared to refuse Colonel Leve's kindness at the previous cocktail party. It's her luck that the colonel fell in love with her. A white officer with cold eyes cursed viciously in a low voice. Well, even though he is a low-ranking vampire, he is still one of the immortal species. It is normal not to accept it, another person said lightly, but Colonel Laves is an elite member of our fighting club, and he will be taught advanced boxing techniques right away. If you become a direct descendant of Major General Crew, if everything goes well, you may even be taught King Fist by the Major General himself and become the third-generation successor of King Fist. If you don't accept pursuit like this, then you really don't know how to commend yourself. The officer from before smiled in agreement. In fact, he knew the vampire woman who was being chased. He once tried to pursue her, but was ruthlessly rejected by her. This also made him hold a grudge, which he always carried in his heart. This time the colonel failed to pursue the pursuit and became angry, which was largely due to his initiative. This feeling of trampling the once high-ranking woman and princess under his feet almost made his heart feel more and more happy and intoxicated. Suddenly, a piercing scream came from the bamboo forest in the distance. The sound seemed to be that of pursuing soldiers. The expressions of the two officers changed slightly. With a wave of his hand, several special forces soldiers around him quickly stepped forward, and in a few moments they caught up and disappeared into the bamboo forest. The people around them are all people who have practiced the simplified boxing techniques of the Holy Fist Palace, and they all have extremely strong qualities. Soon there was a sound of disgusted curses from the front. "Damn monster! Kill him! Tom was bitten, get the serum right away. Hurry up!" Soon, in the darkness ahead, the flashlight light came on, and a special soldier quickly returned to report to the two officers. Reporting to the commander, a vampire hiding spot was found 150 yards ahead. There are 23 vampires and vampires hiding inside. So many, the cold-eyed officer was slightly surprised. "The other person seems to be a member of a small family tree," the soldier replied in a low voice. "Sir, please give us the next instructions." The officer hesitated for a moment and looked at his companion, who also looked at him, obviously waiting for him to make up his mind. He gritted his teeth and was about to give the order to retreat, but the arrogant and cold eyes of the woman from before suddenly appeared in front of him. "Ah!" Suddenly there was another scream, and the screams of soldiers came from the front again. "Shoot! Shoot!" Shouting continued, and bursts of submachine gun fire echoed in the bamboo forest. "All hands on deck! Kill them!" The officer suddenly became cruel. There were more than 20 lower-class vampires. Even if they were not careful, even if they were boxing practitioners, their whole army might be wiped out. Call nearby Wittsburg immediately and ask for support. At night, in the western United States, a conflict between the army and the vampires quietly broke out. Bang! A strong, white-skinned fist hit a vampire on the chin, sending him flying into the air, slamming into a store window on the side of the street. With a loud crash, the window was smashed, and the window was smashed. It shattered into countless pieces and scattered everywhere. "You filthy parasites!" The strong white man stared at the black vampire who was beaten away in disgust, with a trace of amusement in his eyes. A mouthful of phlegm was spat in the other person's face. "He is the 5th generation to practice Bayun Mai Wu." After learning that his relative's children showed symptoms after being sucked by vampires, he was furious. If it were before, he would not know the inside story of the vampires so much, but after joining the fighting club, after learning about this information, I connected various situations I encountered in my life. When I asked about the child this time, I immediately understood that it was a vampire, and immediately rushed over with a group of my brothers. For vampires, anyone who practices Wan Quan and other graded boxing techniques will also practice some small skills as training to avoid being affected by vampires' human control techniques. "I warned you." The strong man walked over, his muscles all moving and trembling like a little mouse. He grabbed the black man's hair and lifted him up with one hand. "But you turned a deaf ear to my words. Now I want you to pay the price. Bang. Another punch. The heavy shock of force made the poor vampire's mind so dizzy that he could hardly see clearly what was in front of him. Biunmaiwa was improved through Jia Long's cooperation with Tu Lan, and even the simplified version has a strong effect against vampires. Coupled with the effect of his own strong qualities, the strong white man was now like a ferocious armored beast, indestructible and extremely tyrannical. There were more and more people watching around, watching the strong white man punch the black man until he was unconscious and unable to resist. Occasionally, the black man would try his best to resist, and he was very fast, but the knife he held could not penetrate the white man's skin. He even grabbed one of his legs and smashed it to the ground like a hammer. From time to time, people around him exclaimed. Scenes like this are now everywhere on the streets and can be seen everywhere. Some boxing practitioners abuse the vampire clan, and there are also very few practitioners who abuse the vampire clan's boxing method. But because there are too many people practicing the Holy Fist Palace boxing method compared to the small number of blood clans, if one boxing practitioner is not successful, there will be two, and if two people are not successful, there will be a group. No matter how many blood clansmen are beaten, they will be beaten and flee. The world is becoming more and more chaotic. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 734. Holy Fist Palace. There is a large-scale conflict with the vampires in the western region. I have sent people to deal with it. However, the situation has developed seriously. I am afraid it may be too late. Sidon stood in front of Garen and reported in a low voice. Not just him, but also Quentin next to him. Both of them looked a little embarrassed and frowned. In the study, Garen was flipping through a newly submitted intelligence document. The only sound in the room was the sound of him turning pages. After a while, Garen closed the secret document and looked up at the two of them. Where has the conflict with the vampires spread to? Liwa, California, and it is still spreading further. Through propaganda, more and more people know the existence of the vampires. This has aroused dissatisfaction among most people that their world is controlled by the vampires. Some cities have boxing practice after catching vampires. They gathered in crowds to protest against the vampire ruling regime, Quentin explained. If there weren't people from the Dark Witch Guild and AG here adding fuel to the flames, I'm afraid it wouldn't be so fast, right? Garen said lightly. Yes, Quentin nodded, inciting fear and hatred among ordinary people towards the vampires. This is their purpose. Then go with the general trend. Conflict is inevitable. What we have to do is wait quietly, Garen said calmly. Wait? Shouldn't we strike first? Sidon asked doubtfully. It's meaningless. I can't find the true form of the dead apostles, and I can't kill them. Just like Tu Lan. Garen shook his head. Speaking of Tu Lan, this guy has fallen in love with Shangquan Palace from body to heart. He seems to be addicted to drugs all day long. He stays in his room in the palace and keeps practicing the Huanlu boxing given to her. It was a soul guide implanted by Garen himself. Perhaps her dead apostle's physique was beneficial to her practice, and her current progress was frighteningly fast. This often made Garen sigh. If it weren't for the limitations of the soul aura guide, which prevented the vampires from practicing King Fist, it would have been easy for the vampires to surpass ordinary humans with their qualifications. The good thing now is that Tu Lan is barely under the control of Garen and can be regarded as a top combat force in the Holy Fist Palace. The rest are Damhosemen, the four generals, and the high-level forces are still not as good as the Blood Clan. But it is already very powerful. Ignore this matter for the time being and wait until the conflict between the vampires and ordinary people expands to a certain extent. Let's go to the meeting now. Garen stood up. The two disciples nodded slightly respectfully. The three of them left the room, walked along the corridor, and entered a magnificent silver hall. The hall is rectangular, with a black stone rectangular table tens of meters long placed in the middle. People are already sitting on both sides. Representative giants from Lashady, representatives from major boxing schools, as well as several new general-level officers in the army, and several national parliamentarians from the political circle. In a short period of time, because of the strange and powerful boxing skills of the Holy Fist Palace, the strength of the forces attracted has reached this level. This force has become a behemoth in the entire United States, and no one can ignore the combined power. Dam and Hassaman played a big role in the connection, and one of the congressmen was even a member of their family. Everyone was getting impatient. So many giants, big figures in politics and finance, were waiting for a young man who was only in his 20s. This made these giants feel very unhappy. If it weren't for the fact that the power of the Holy Fist Palace was too mysterious and too involved, and it was the only force that humans had any hope of fighting against the vampires, these people wouldn't have come eagerly to hold any meeting. At this time, the door of the hall was pushed open with a bang. 3 figures slowly walked into the hall step by step. Garin, who was walking at the front, was wearing a white slim-fitting Taoist uniform and a strange black mask. It could be vaguely seen that one of his eyes seemed to be blind and he had no energy. The blonde hair shawl on her head kept flowing slightly back as she walked. As Garin walked in, the giants at the table immediately started discussing in low voices, and some people snorted to show their dissatisfaction. Some people looked at Garin coldly, as if they were trying to figure out how to defeat this young man and gain control of the meeting. This meeting gathered an extremely powerful force. If someone can master this power, it will not only be the United States, but this influence may also affect Europe and even other regions. After all, the power of many economic giants is pervasive. The careerists are ready to take action. Garin led Quinton and Sidon slowly across the long table, walked to the main seat, and sat down. Okay, this internal meeting of the Holy Fist Palace has officially begun, he whispered. Your Excellency Boxing Saint, this time we jointly request an internal meeting. This is also in response to the increasingly aggressive situation of the vampires. We must come up with a charter and a handling plan. Emergency measures are indispensable. A senator moved the wheat on his lips and said calmly. I think the biggest key to our meeting is to elect a main figure who can decide the situation as the leader of the meeting, he said with a natural expression. Although Your Excellency Garin is powerful and can fight against the Death Apostles, to truly control the overall situation, it requires more than just individual strength. It should be more about the overall situation and strategizing. The Blood Tribe is so desperate that they might attack our weak points. For example, Lord Garin and the family members, relatives and friends of all of you here. If we use this as a threat, it will be a very difficult trouble to deal with. A congressman nodded in agreement. We really need someone who can coordinate the overall situation and have a far-sighted vision to take charge of the situation. You can rest assured about this. I have arranged for my subordinate vampire members to live around the safe isolation area to ensure the absolute safety of the isolation area. In addition, there are also the latest top-notch technical equipment opened by the Lizardi Group. Monitored in all directions 24 hours a day, Garin said calmly. He understands the resistance of these people who have been suppressed by the vampires. He doesn't care about overall coordination and so on. He can completely let the guys who specialize in conspiracy handle it. Anyway, these people hate the vampires even more than he does. Only by completely defeating the mountain above their heads can they truly take control of human rights. I have no problem with coordinating the overall situation. As the base camp of the Holy Fist Palace, no outside vampires will sneak in. You can rest assured to discuss the response plan for the vampires here, Garin replied calmly. Thank you, Mr. Garin. This is indeed crucial. The power of the Blood Clan is pervasive, and now only the Holy Fist Palace can provide us with sufficient security. It's ridiculous that Jackson and the others think that the security facilities around them are safe enough. The general shook his head. The General Jackson he was talking about had been assassinated by the Blood Clan at 2 o'clock in the morning last night. Not only him, but also several other strong resistance and fanatical racist high-ranking officials were killed or captured by the Blood Clan, which shocked the world. This is the main reason why these high-ranking officials and dignitaries all gathered in the Holy Fist Palace in such a hurry. We must fight back, a strong fight. We must give the old Blood Clan some color. First of all, we must find out to what extent the old Blood Clan has penetrated into our power. The key point of this is to be able to distinguish the difference between vampires and ordinary people. Our group has developed a special instrument that can determine whether the person is a vampire through cardiac electrocardiogram testing. It should be put into use quickly. If the Holy Fist Palace Heart Study Group can help us coordinate our actions, the effect will be greatly amplified. Jia Long waved his hand, and Tu Lan appeared behind him with a scoff. After understanding what Jia Long meant, she quickly participated in the discussion among the dignitaries. The blood races currently controlled by the Holy Fist Palace are all called New Blood races. All of them it was transferred to Tu Ian's command to form an independent force. The soul guide in it was removed by Jia Long himself, and then Tu Lan was re-implanted with the spirit soul guide generated by her practice of secret martial arts, becoming her direct subordinate. Holding his head with one hand, Garen listened calmly to the noisy debate meeting among the people. Soon, a simple and effective plan for the vampires was released. With the transmission of radio waves, orders one after another quickly flowed out of here and spread to all parts of the United States, mobilizing forces to start operations. Garen looked at the enthusiastic and excited expressions of these people in boredom, without any emotion in his eyes. Representatives of the Lizardy group and the other two economic groups put forward suggestions one after another, and all of them were adopted. They have been secretly studying the vampires for many years, and now they have finally waited for the critical moment to exert their efforts. Especially Rhodes' brother, a young man who looks cold and handsome, actually took out a special virus researched for the vampires, a biological weapon, which can make the vampires suffer from weakness, limbs, and serious injuries. Even consciousness will be unclear and blurred. Humanity has been depressed for too long. Garen sighed in his heart. As long as they were given a chance, the rebound power would be so exaggerated that he would be a little stunned. Biological viruses, blood gas shock bombs, infrasonic oscillators, blood core detectors, and various targeted methods were released one by one. Everyone had always felt that they were weak, but now they gathered together, they suddenly realized that together, everyone the power is so powerful. And that's not counting the Super Warrior Project with the participation of extremely generals and senators. The Super Warriors produced have already taken shape, and their individual strength does not belong to lower-level vampires. Then there was a representative of the Turan group who came up with a technology that other forces were still in the research stage, the neural high-speed suit. It can speed up human nerve reaction speed by more than 50 times. This reaction speed is enough for an ordinary person to keep up with the speed of ordinary middle and lower class vampires. Although there is also the problem of muscle damage caused by the inertial impulse of movement, this problem was quickly solved under the collective research of everyone. The high-speed nerve suit, super warriors, and top elite disciples from each boxing sect, this kind of power even shocked Tu Lan. Even in a short period of time, a large number of troops with lower vampire strength can be gathered at the upper level. This group of people gathered together, and even Garen was a little stunned by the burst of power. This is the rise and counter-attack of mankind, someone stood up and shouted loudly, with a fanatical expression. Today's meeting will go down in history, some people even raised their fists and waved them. Looking at the group of fanatics in front of him, Garen suddenly had a hunch that perhaps the time for a real showdown with the vampires would soon come.